Yeah. This would be Thursday, January 23rd. We'll keep going through the Greek mythology stuff. Alright, here. Alright. So we've already gotten through all these words with you guys. We'll do the speedy version with you. So jovial, what god does jovial come from?
Zeus.
Zeus. What's his Roman name? Jove. What's his other Roman name? Jupiter. And that's where we get all the planet names from. They come from all the Greek and Roman gods as you go through all those. And what is it jovial means? And that's ironic because how is Zeus' personality in most of our stories going to be?
Angry.
The fact that the word happy comes from him, but he's angry and grumpy and stuff like that. And then Blaine, I'm going to have you actually scoot back one so that Ben can see the screen. So let's go to that next desk back. Cereal. What god do we get cereal from? Demeter. What's her Roman name? Ceres. And what is she the god of?
Grain.
Did you say her Roman name was cereal?
Ceres.
Her Roman name was Ceres. She was the god of
Agriculture.
There you go. Over there, the god of agriculture, grains and harvest. She'll almost always have some kind of grainy thing in the background. Omni.
Is the cereal thing just to help us remember what?
This cereal thing.
Yeah, the why?
I'm showing why are we doing these words?
Yeah, like.
For the most part, to show you the fact that the words we use every day and stuff like that all connect back to Greek mythology. So it gives you a little background. Plus, it gives me intro to some interesting stories. We get to the next little words. It makes me fun. And because everyone likes cereal. And what is cereal's food from?
Grain.
Works for me. Grain, wheat, stuff like that. Volcano. And where do we get the word volcano? Hephaestus, not hepatitis. And Hephaestus, the only god that was crippled, which is why he has the cane or the crutch. Just like so on. The crutch in the background over there. And what was he the god of?
Forge.
Nicely done. Forge, metalworking and stuff like that. Hephaestus. And why was the volcano named after him?
Because it would.
Bella?
Because he organizes things.
No, good guess. Fauntleroy?
Because they thought that his workshops were in the mountains, so when they blew up, they thought that it was the
There you
heat.
go. He would use his workshop inside of a mountain, and it was built up to heat, shoot out the top. So anytime they saw the volcano, they thought that was the place where Vulcans lived. And there's the anvil that he uses to drop on rabbits' heads and roadrunners and stuff like that. To rub the fire. Mercurial, not a word that you guys use much now. When you get to high school, it'll become much more when you get to science and chemistry. And what god do we get Mercurial from?
Hermes.
Hermes, his Roman name is?
Mercury.
Mercury. And Mercurial means to?
Change quickly.
Nice. To change quickly from one state to another. And I think fatal was the last word we got to. And as we were going through the you got that one, aren't you guys fancy? Fatal, what word does fatal come from?
The face.
Nicely done. Forgot the caduceus staff. What's the caduceus staff look like?
It's like a staff with wings and two snakes wrapping around it.
Nicely done. So we have the caduceus staff with the stick and the two wings. And then I found the ones on hospitals. That's usually what you're going to find. Although sometimes the hospital one to simplify it will just be the stick with one snake going around. Still considered the caduceus staff. But that'll be the symbol that you'll see much more often in the hospital and medical world. Alright, now, fatal comes from the fates. We had three fates who were the three sisters. Remember the name of the first sister that creates the string?
Clotho.
Clotho. The way you remember it is we get a word from her. Cloth. Because she was the one that made the string, we get the word cloth and clothing from Clotho or Clotho, because she was the one that had the string that came from it. And then she handed it to her sister who had the measuring stick. What was the second girl's name? Lachesis. We don't get any good voice from her. Lachesis, and she had the measuring stick with all the different months and days and years. And then finally the third sister would step up with the sisters, and that with the scissors, and that was Atropos. And we do get a word from hers that's not one you guys are familiar with. It's called atrophy. It's when, if you're in the hospital for a long time and you don't use your muscles, they start to, your legs or your arms sort of get smaller. Atrophy is the idea of it felt like your muscles were getting cut. And it comes from atropos. And it's just before, probably not one you guys use very often. But fatal, if it meant that you, the fates had decided that your string was up, So if you're in a fatal accident, what happens to you?
You die.
Nice one. And that fatal means that you have died or you are dead and are no longer with us. Then, fasting. There we got to Iris. And with Iris, what god does Iris come from?
Iris.
You guys all grumpy. And what is Iris the god of? Rainbows. She also had a job.
She was the messenger of Hera.
Messenger of Hera, and so the problem was whenever she came down to Earth for Hera, what would she leave behind? She would leave the rainbow coming down behind her, stuff like that. And that was the information that with Zeus and his friendliness. And how would Zeus cover his friendliness when he was on Earth?
Rain clouds.
He would use rain clouds, because that way Hera wouldn't be able to see him during all of his friendliness down on Earth. And that's why she would then send down her messenger to find out, and that's why you get rainbows after a rainstorm, is because it was Hera checking up on Zeus. Definition of Iris would be colored part of your eye, and then the other one is flower. Nicely done. There's the colored part of your eyeball, and then remember what the white part is called?
Sclera.
Sclera. And then the part in the very middle?
Pupil.
Pupil. Go you guys. And then there's your iris, the flower. Next up, now we can jump to our new one from there. Music and museum. Where would we get music and museum from? Ben?
The Muses,
Nice one. And who are the muses?
9 gods, each of whom embodied an aspect of the humanities and arts, inspired wonderful
Nice detailed answer. The muses were the ones who inspired artists. Socks?
Are those the singing people in Hercules?
You are correct. They are the singing people that danced around and stuff like that were on the jar. Muses. The way the Greeks believed it worked is that humans, we'll eventually get to this, are made from either mud or we're made from rocks, depending on which race of humans we are. Stories to get to later. But with that, we do not have any innate artistic ability whatsoever, that we are naturally unskilled. And so if you were to give a human a paintbrush, then they would just walk up like, and just slap it against there, and that was the most beautiful thing they could do. So then how is it that humans are able to create these great works of art? Because the muses. And the muses were basically thought, the easiest way to imagine it is they were little fairies, little wings, and they would come up behind you, and they would pick certain people to then channel themselves through. So if we were to give Scully a paintbrush and say, go paint something beautiful, he'd just walk up and just sit there and smack the paintbrush against it and go, it would look pretty, and be good. But then if the muses decided he was worthy, they would flap up behind him and go, bing, and tap him on the head, like, and it would come out looking beautiful, all because the muses would focus through you. And there were 9 of them, one for each of these different areas of art. There was one muse for painting, one muse for sculpting, one muse for dancing, one muse for singing. And so each one would then work through people. Which is why, when some artist does something wonderful, they'll say, you are my muse. And that was sort of like the pickup line you use on people. That means, I couldn't do anything without you because you're the one that inspires this in me. And that's why there's also like a band called Muse and stuff like that. It's all the same idea. So that's where the muse comes in. So music and museum. Music is sound that's inspired by the muses. A museum is a building full of stuff created by
the Muses.
So that's why it's called a museum, and music all comes back from these muses. The music is pretty sound, and then the museum, collection of art, all done by the muses. Humans in their natural state have no artistic ability. We're special.
Oh, yeah, I could have told you that.
I know, it's okay. Gabby, you ready for the next one?
Yeah.
June, the month. Go for it.
Hera.
Why Hera?
Because she is the god of marriage and childbirth and the queen of the gods.
No, and one more clue.
Her Roman name is Juno.
Nicely done. Juno. J-U-N-O. And so June comes from Hera. Once again, the Greeks loved irony. One of the big parts that goes into all the irony with this is that with the Greeks, they made Hera the god of childbirth and the god of marriage. The irony being, font?
She never got married and she never had children.
Close. She was married. But had a horrible marriage and hated her husband. Because who's she married to? Zeus. And her and Zeus fought all the time, especially because Zeus kept going behind her back and being friendly. Part of his friendliness was that Zeus ended up having a whole lot of children that weren't hers. So she spends a lot of her stories busy trying to kill babies. And yet she's the god of marriage and birth. We're done. So the Greeks are like, oh, irony brush. And they slap you upside the head with it. So the problem also is that there was a time of year that people usually get married. The time of year that people get married is June. And it was called that because it was the time of Juno. It was usually when things started to get warm. It was pretty outside. That was about the time you're like, hey, it's time to get married because you no longer have to worry about the snow and the slush. Things look beautiful out. So that became known as the time of Juno, the time of getting married. And eventually it just became known as June. Also, there was a movie years ago about a movie called Juno, Juno, about a teen girl who gets pregnant. And so that's why she's called Juno, because it's the god of childbirth. And it's about this movie about this girl making a poor choice and learning from it, stuff like that. Learning. So June was the month of marriage. Then, let's see, from there we'll go to mind. From the mind, where would we get that one? This one's slightly tougher. Can you again?
Athena,
Why Athena?
because her Roman name is Minerva.
Nice. And what's she the god of?
War.
And
Wisdom.
nice one. She's the god of war and wisdom. Both. We get it from Athena, who is, well, one, I forgot to point you the pictures of. Hera, she's the girl over here in pink, and that's a peacock on her head. That's a story that we'll get to. Her symbol was the peacock, and then she's also the one over here. Look, there's another peacock behind her in that one, sitting on the throne. And then here's Hera over this one. Oh, look, another peacock behind her. And so the peacock was her symbol because of the story of Argo, but we'll get to that one. There's a friend of hers, a bunch of eyeballs got poked out, but let's get into ourselves. But back to Minerva. With this one gets to one of our first stories that we'll get a chance to get into with all this. Zeus, let's see, was with Hera at this time. He decided he was going to make a friend, if you will. And so he made friends with the god of memory by the name of Mincynine. And he and Mincynine were hanging out, and they were friendly. And after some time, Mincynine came up to Zeus and said, hey, hun, I have good news. He goes, what's up? She goes, I'm pregnant. He goes, oh, yay. Because now there's evidence of his friendliness. So Zeus decides that he's going to have to fix this issue by disposing of the evidence. Said evidence being Mincynine herself. The problem is, Mincinene's a god. And since gods are immortal, they're not easy. You can't just go around stabbing people. If not, he would have happily made that choice. So he has to come up with another way to try and get rid of Mincynine. So he goes, well, let's celebrate. So they decide to go celebrate this wonderful news of her being pregnant. So they go out, and he goes, let's go have a picnic. She's like, oh, I love picnics. He's like, oh, I know, it's going to be great. And they go out and have this big picnic, and they go out to this meadow, and he's trying to hide it from Hera. Hera at this time didn't know to have the whole storm cloud and rainbow thing. This was early on in their relationship, one of the very first friends he made. And so they're out there having a picnic, things are going well, they're drinking some cheese, eating some cheese, drinking some water, back and forth, until he gets done and she's like, well, this was wonderful. He's like, I know. He's like, you want to play a game? She goes, I love games. He goes, I know. She goes, what game are we going to play? He goes, it's a new game I just came up with called How Small an Animal Can You Become? The Greeks believed that the gods were much like animorphs, and you could change shape into any animal that you wanted to. They could, like werewolves, they could change into any animal as they went through. So she goes, "Oh, sounds like a fun game. Let's change into different animals." They start off small, or start off like easy. He becomes like an elephant, and she becomes a hippo. He becomes a cow, and she becomes like a donkey. And they keep going back and forth into smaller animals and giggling and like slapping each other and having a good time, as gods do. And they start getting smaller. They get down like a raccoon, and then a cat, and then a squirrel, and then a chipmunk, and then a mouse. And they start getting down to insects. She's like a dragonfly, and she's like a cockroach. And they keep going back and forth until he turns into a fly and flies around her in his little fly form. He's like, I've got you beat. You're never going to beat me. And then she goes, oh, I have it. And he goes, what? He turns back into his normal human form, Zeus form. And she goes, this. And she goes, whoop, and turns into a little gnat. and flies around him in gnat form. And she's like, "You're never going to beat this one." And he goes, "You're right," and then reaches out, plucks her out of the air, throws her into his mouth, and swallows. She's now trapped inside of him. Being trapped inside of him, she can't get free. Now there's no more evidence of his friendliness, and he's free and clear. She disappears, no one ever hears from her again, and things go well. Years go by, decades go by. Eventually, he's up on Mount Olympus, walking around one day, when he starts stumbling around and getting a horrible headache. It's a thumper. He can just feel it going dunk, 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 dunk in the middle of his head. He's like, "I can't take it anymore." So he goes around and starts asking the other gods for help. And he's like, "Hey, can you guys come up with a way for me to fix my headache?" They're like, "We have no idea. You know, like Tylenol's not even been invented yet." He's like, "Oh no." So eventually he talks to one. They're like, "Hey, go talk to Hephaestus. Hephaestus has this great cure for headaches." He's like, "Okay." So he goes over and talks to his son Hephaestus. He's like, "Hey, Hefe," that's his nickname for him. "Hefe," he's like, "I've got this horrible headache. Can you help me?" And Hephaestus goes, "Yeah, not a problem whatsoever." He's like, "But you might not like it." He goes, "What's your solution?" He goes, "Well, here's how it works. I'm going to need you to come over here to this chair, lean forward, grab onto the back of it, and lean your head forward." Zeus goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "And I pull out this axe." Zeus goes, "Yeah." And I take the axe, and I whack it into the top of your head, wiggle it back and forth, rip it out, and then poke around inside to see what's giving you a headache. Zeus goes, "That's genius, okay." So Zeus goes over and grabs onto the edge of it and leans forward. Hephaestus is like, "This might hurt you more than me." He's like, "What?" He's like, "Shh, don't worry." And just whack right at the top of Zeus's head. Wiggles the axe back and forth, pulls it out. And Zeus is like, "Quick, look inside. What do you see?" And he holds it up, and Hephaestus goes over there and starts poking inside of Zeus's head, like poke, poke, like pokes the brain, and Zeus's leg kicks out inside. He's like, "Wait!" and jumps back. And when he does, a little person jumps out of Zeus's brain. Bing! And lands on the ground in front of him. And then, like the shrinky dinks that you drop into water when you're a little kid, it goes into full form and stands in front of him. It's a girl in full armor with a shield and a sword and all of that. This girl that pops out of his brain is Athena. Athena is Mensine's daughter. Apparently, she gave birth inside of him. You need to take off because you're crippled?
Yeah.
That's fine. Take off, crippled. And so she gave birth inside of Zeus. And inside of his brain, Athena went up on top of Zeus's brain and built a forge, much like Hephaestus uses. And she created her own armor and weapons. And that's what gave him a headache. Now, I know, Mr. Brovicast, I have problems with that. I'm sure you do. There's lots of problems with that story. What happens to Mensinine? They never explain it again. Where did she get the medal? I have no idea. How did she? Just roll with it. So she jumps out of Zeus's brain, lands in front of him, grows up to full size. Because she was born from Zeus's brain, she becomes the god of wisdom and smartness. Because she was also busy making armor and weapons while inside of his brain, she becomes also one of the two gods of war. Her god of war is the god of honorable war, the god of just war. The idea where you want to get into a fight, and you want to make it fair, and you want to fight and make it an equal war. Whereas Ares is the god of bully war, where you want to like kick dust in their eyes, like you see like, all the bad guys in every bad movie, like they throw dust in the guy's eyes and like poke him. That's how Ares is. Whereas like Athena is like the good guy who tries to make it an even fight. So Minerva, and that's where we get the word mind from, is your thinker, and that's where she was born from. Lamb.
If they could like become any animal, would an elephant be bigger or smaller than Zeus?
I have no idea. Depends if he was in his human form or god form.
Well, if he was in his
Because for them, human form was just a form of animal. Their god form is humongous, but they would take the form of a human, and that was just considered like an animal form.
then couldn't she just become something really, really, really big and then bust out?
Wouldn't bust out, you can't bust through a god. Once again, you're trying to apply logic. The more you do that, the more it's going to hurt your head.